everyone. It's October. Spooky season is upon us. I've been reading a few stories to kick off the month for the BookTube event Occult Detective October, which was created by MJ at Reading This Life and that many other booktubers are participating in. I'm not really following any of the prompts, the 4 prompts, weekly prompts. I'm just going to read what I feel like. It involves occult detectives. And as regular watchers of this channel know, I'm a big fan of Manly Wade Wellman, his various stories, most of which feature, not all of course, but many of which feature occult detectives or monster fighters or paranormal investigators or what have you, however you want to term them. I read a couple of John Thunstone stories. Now, John Thunstone was one of Wellman's first occult detectives. His first, I believe, was Judge Pursuivant. I believe Judge Pursuivant was Wellman's first occult detective, but the first one that ran for the longest time is John Thunstone. And I read 2 John Thunstone stories. One was a novelette that was originally published in the July 1946 edition of Weird Tales magazine. And that was along with a Seabury Quinn, Jules DeGranin story, a Ray Bradbury story called The Night, and an Allison V. Harding story, and several other writers, of course. But Wellman got the cover story, his John Thunstone novelette, Shonokin Town. And I read Shonokin Town in this collection, the Nightshade Books, first volume, the third Cry to Legba and Other Invocations. And this one has all of the John Thunstone short stories, most of which were published in the 40s in Weird Tales magazine. There's one that was published in the 1951 in Weird Tales, and then another one that was published in Rouse Him Not was published in Kadath number 5, which was, I guess, a small press. And then, of course, there are some Lee Cobbett stories. In a previous video, I talked about one of the Lee Cobbett stories, the Dakwa. Very cool edition. Nice sketch there of Manly Wade Wellman. And the Shonokins, let's talk first about who the Shonokins were. Now, Manly Wade Wellman used a lot of kind of Appalachian myths and Cherokee and other Native American myths, but he also created a lot of his own myths and made them seem, added kind of a verisimilitude to them so they seemed like perhaps real myths. And one of them was this book of magic spells, The Long Lost Friend, and some other creatures that he came up with. And one of those races was the Shonokins. Now, the Shonokins are depicted as a kind of pre-human race, small, kind of gray, leathery-ish skin. You only ever see males. No one ever seems to see a female Shonokin. They believe that the humans, Homo sapiens, have usurped their rule of planet Earth and they want to get it back. And often John Thunstone goes up against them in his short stories. Not everyone, of course, quite a few though, at least 3 or 4, I believe. And in this novelette, Shonokin Town, he goes right into their midst. So basically, the story is that a man approaches Thunstone, and John Thunstone is a big man. When Manly Wade Wellman was a big man himself, I think he liked big ex-football player type of build guys usually. I think John the Balladeer, his most famous character, Silver John, is not described as particularly giant, but certainly a strapping man. And John Thunstone is a big guy with a trim mustache. John Thunstone is a big, robust man, and he's very well versed in various occult lore and ghost, demon, monster fighting skills, and he often challenges these different things. And in this one, he's approached by a man who had kind of accidentally stopped over in this small town. I believe the town is called Araby. Doesn't give a location. I'm assuming it's somewhere in the east, in the mountains, maybe North Carolina or somewhere in the Appalachians or nearby. Anyway, it's in a place called Zor Valley. This train line there's just a station house, and it's known to be, the train never really stops. It usually just goes straight on through. For some reason, something happens, and this doctor is stranded in this town. He's attacked by the Shonokins. He ends up hitting one with his medical case and kills this creature, the Shonokin. And the Shonokins have this severe dread of their own dead. They are to run fleeing away. They won't go near if there's a dead person on the body of a Shonokin on the trail or on the street. They won't take that path. They'll go somewhere else. And who knows why they have this fear. Perhaps there's no female Shonokins seen, or children Shonokins, so maybe that's implying that there's few of them left in the world, and they have to, if one of them's dead, it's a severe shock and horror for them. At any rate, the man manages to hide himself away after being kind of beaten by these Shonokins, and then escaping. He hides in this little station house until he's able to catch a train and escape. He fears he's being followed by a couple Shonokins who boarded the train after him, and he's scared, and he goes to John Thunstone, who has a reputation for dealing with this kind of strange thing. And Thunstone says, "Hey, no problem, dude." And he's battled Shonokins before. He doesn't say dude. That's not his style, of course. He takes this doctor and puts him in with some friends who will protect him, and then he goes and gets off at the train, especially right close to this Shonokin town at nighttime. And as he's trying to sneak up on this town, he encounters a kind of young football playing, I guess he's like a high school kid, big husky kid. His name's Crash Collins. And he runs into this kind of football playing kid, big robust kid who wants to come and help him for whatever reason. We're never really said any reason other than he just doesn't like the Shonokins, and he heard about Thunstone, and Thunstone's going here, and he wanted to help him. And John Thunstone says, "Hey, this is dangerous, dude." Again, he doesn't speak dude. I don't know why I keep saying dude. Thunstone doesn't use a word like dude. He's a very dignified gentleman. He says, "Stay away. This is dangerous. Leave it to the professional me." But as he's sneaking into the town, he's got some charms in his pockets and some various things. He hears a ruckus, and he sees that this Crash kid has been attacked and beaten up and is being held by the Shonokins and is being brought to some kind of big temple sort of building, or looks like a big square walled fort or something. And they're going to sacrifice him to the creatures that are inside, and what those creatures are, and how Thunstone stops the Shonokins from doing what they're planning to do, details the rest of the story. It's a very fun story, and I'm happy to say that this is actually the one issue of Weird Tales that I own. I bought this issue years and years and years ago from a dealer somewhere in the Pike Place Market in the Seattle area, downtown Seattle, along with a Shadow Pulp, the pulp magazine, The Shadow. I have one issue of that, and this one issue of Weird Tales from July 1946. I remember it being in decent condition. I read this Shonokin Town story then when I got it years and years ago. I hope these two pulps are in decent condition. They've been buried in storage for a long time, sealed in plastic sacks, in a sealed plastic tote, Rubbermaid tote. So I'm hoping they're still okay and not too banged up. I will retrieve them when I return home next summer, hopefully. Why I didn't bring them with me over here, I have no idea. I guess I just figured I had the story already in a more easily read form, but now it seems crazy that I didn't take those pulps back with me. But anyway, it's cool that I have that pulp. I'd like to get more Weird Tales, but at least that's what I do have. The story is fun. It's one of, I believe there's 18 John Thunstone stories. 16 John Thunstone stories. All of those 16, 15 were published in Weird Tales. And the last one, the 16th short story or novelette, is Rouse Him Not, published in Kadath in 1982. And now Manly Wade Wellman passed away in 1986. And right before he passed, one of the last books he published was this second John Thunstone novel, The School of Darkness. put out by Doubleday Science Fiction, who put out the 5 Silver John novels, and the previous John Thunstone novel, which I have over here, Without a Dust Jacket, What Dreams May Come. Right? Again, no cover to speak of. If I remember right, the cover wasn't particularly memorable, just like this one isn't particularly memorable. I think there was only one more book, or a collection, The Valley So Low, and maybe a historical with slight fantasy elements. Kahina was the very last book that was published, I believe, posthumously for Mr. Wellman, who passed away in 1986, so a year after this book came out. Now, only 2 John Thunstone novels, but, it's a good run. Again, as I mentioned in previous videos about Manly Wade Wellman, he wrote a lot for Weird Tales and other science fiction magazines. He wrote a Captain Future novel, and he wrote several other science fiction stories and some other novels. And then as the pulp market dried up, he went more into the direction of publishing historical books and adventure books and juveniles, of which I'd love to get my hands on them. I know Alan at the Book Suppository is brewing up a really fantastic shelf tour video of his Manly Wade Wellman acquisitions, and he's got a shitload of them, and put my collection to shame. He's got a whole bunch of these hard to find, especially middle period Wellman novels. But various smart small press authors brought Wellman back into the weird fiction field. I've talked before about Carl Edward Wagner and David Drake's Carcosa Press. They put out a couple of collections, including a second one after Worse Things Waiting, Lonely Vigils, which collected the John Thunstone stories from Weird Tales. They wouldn't have had access, of course, to the last one, Rouse Them Not. And they also Doubleday Science Fiction, this kind of, he got some publication in the small press magazines like Kadaf, like Stuart David Schiff's Whispers, got a couple issues, at least one dedicated to him. His story started appearing more and more, and he got a contract with Doubleday Science Fiction to write more Silver John novels, also a couple more John Thunstone novels, and some other collections and ancillary things. And this was one of the John Thunstone novels that came out of that late period blossoming back, being embraced by fantasy fiction fans and weird horror fiction fans. And let me talk briefly about this School of Darkness. I'm not going to go into too much detail about it. It's a fun, fast read. I read it basically in a day or a day and a half. I've read this several times. This is not the best book by Wellman. It was written late in his life, but it's still quite well written and very fun. So the situation here, like a lot of Wellman's characters, John Thunstone does not shy away from danger. He goes at it, right? But he's also careful. He's a planner. The situation here, again, we're not given a location, but there's a place called Buford College. I'm guessing it's somewhere in New England. Not 100% sure. I'm guessing so. And the book starts with John Thunstone flying in and being picked up at the airport, and he's one of the guest speakers at this college, Buford State or whatever it's called. He's going to be part of a symposium on the occult and on occult beliefs and mythology, etc. And he's one of several speakers at this place, and he meets 3 others who will be his kind of companions in arms in this sort of escalating trouble that occurs. But basically he finds out that Buford College was long ago, a couple hundred years before, back in the Salem witch trials era, perhaps has its roots in witchcraft. And a rich man was sick and was healed by some helpful women, quote unquote. There's a couple of covens active in this Buford State area, and basically this rich man back in the past had endowed the one of the chief women who helped him, one of the chief witches, and her banker husband, with a lot of money to set up this college. And that's what started this college. And now some of the local witchy elements are trying to gain an influence over the college and they want to do away with John Thunstone. Now, in these earlier Thunstone Weird Tales stories, one of his chief antagonists, really other than the Shonokins themselves as a race, one of the only really recurring villains is a diabolist, a Satanist, dark magician named Rowley Thorn, or Rowley Thorn. And Rowley Thorn returns from wherever he had disappeared to in the stories back in this novel. It's no spoiler to say. This is basically mentioned on the back here. It's pretty obvious from the beginning, right? And Rowley Thorn has been, the last Thunstone saw him was that Thorn was trying to call a bunch of demons down or to snatch away Thunstone to some hell dimension, and Thunstone did some things, worked his own kind of white magic against it, and the demons snatched Thorn away instead, and he's been since disappeared, and Thunstone saw him vanish, but now Thorn is back. How? Why? What's up? Obviously something is going to happen over the weekend of this symposium. Now, along with Thunstone, there are other speakers here. There's a Japanese Shinto, he's not a priest. He's kind of a occult expert in the religion of Shintoism named Tashiro Shimada. And there's Father Brundon, who's a Catholic priest who's done several exorcisms. And there's a return of a cool character who was seen in a Silver John novel, the first Silver John novel, published back in 1980 or 1981, a few years before this one, named Ruben Manco, Chief Ruben Manco, who's the Cherokee medicine man. And those three will, team up, not only alternating giving their presentations at this symposium, but will help Thunstone combat Thorn and his coven acolytes, led by a beautiful, buxom local lady who's part of the dramatic arts program called Griselle Fian, and who seems to be the head witch in this area. And complicating things is John Thunstone's on and off again Lady Love, his girlfriend named Sharon, the Countess Montesico. Apparently, she got tired of waiting around for Thunstone, whose life of danger, a typical, pulp hero. My life is too dangerous to have you in it. You will always be used against me, and you'll always be in fear for your life, sort of thing, a la Doc Savage and other pulp heroes. And so she, got tired of waiting for him, even though she loved him, and went off and married this count, which perhaps is detailed in one of these earlier stories that I haven't read, because apparently the count was not a good guy. And Thunstone might have had something to do with getting her free of him. But anyway, she still inherited his title, the Countess Montesico. And she pops back into Thunstone's life. And of course, they rekindle their love that way. But of course, she also comes into danger because Rowley Thorn has always had designs on her and her beauty and relative innocence. Anyway, very fun book. It's kind of alternates in a very interesting fashion lots of lore, real life lore and history. When each of these individuals give their presentation, you hear a lot about Shintoism. It only takes a couple pages, but it's pretty interesting. You see a lot hear about the Catholic Church's stance on exorcism, various things, and the audience there's Q&A with the audience, and some of the audience are hostile because they're part of this coven, etc. And Chief Ruben Manco has a very dramatic, summoning the rain dance that he does in the middle of the concert hall there. And of course, the capper of this symposium is John Thunstone's final keynote speech at the end, where everything kind of comes to a head. Pretty cool. There's some fun action and suspenseful scenes here and there. And there's a good sense of dread and danger, perhaps, also mixed with a little coziness aspect of we're at a college, even though this college has a kind of dark history. And we have these other strong men of various faiths banding together to help each other. But it's all very fun. It's, even though maybe the What Dreams May Come, the other Thunstone book, is a little more, Thunstone's by himself and pretty much operating alone in a pretty dangerous situation in a small English village in that one, dealing with some ancient gods and druids and pagan cults and things. And that's a good book too. This one's got just a kind of cool vibe that I really like, and a kind of hangout vibe mixed with some danger and some creepiness, more eerie than any outright horror, I guess you could say, although there is summonings of some things and some, death spells and etc. that are used. But overall, it's a real fun read. I recommend it. And again, John Thunstone is if anyone can be called an occult detective, it is he, although he's perhaps a bit more of a, he's also more of a man of action. He has this, now in the earlier stories, I wanted to point this out. This is one thing that is cool. Another kind of crossover that Manly Wade Wellman does with some of his characters. They know each other. They sometimes cross over. Judge Pursuant ends up in the fourth Silver John novel as a key character. One of the Lee Cobbett stories has Pursuant in that. Ruben Manco, like I mentioned, is kind of a, ancillary character, but he has a big key appearance in the Old Gods Waken, the first John the Balladeer novel, and he appears here in this John Thunstone novel. And at the beginning of this, Thunstone has a letter from Judge Pursuant, and he reads the letter, and it's cool that Pursuant saying, "I'm in the middle of writing this monograph, but I wish I could be there. I sense something's going to happen there. Wish I could be there to help," sort of thing. And then Thunstone smiles, thinking of this still upright and strong 80-something-year-old man, much like maybe close to what Wellman was like. And in this one, and in the What Dreams May Come, the other novel, and I believe in the 82 John Thunstone short story Rouse Him Not, that was written much later, of course, in the earlier stories, he also carries Judge Pursuant's cane. It's a cane, it's a sword cane, and in the cane has a special silver blade with an inscription that is in Latin, and it basically translates as, "So perish all thine enemies, O Lord." And it has some kind of protective properties. Thunstone uses it definitely at some key points in this book. He uses it in other stories. He's older now a little bit, maybe than he was in the Weird Tales stories, but he doesn't need the cane, but he carries it. It was a gift from Judge Pursuant, passing on to a like-minded occult detective, occult investigator. So those are two really fun stories, or a story and a book. And like I said, this is a fast read. You can read it pretty fast, especially if you're interested in it like myself. So I hope you're enjoying whatever you're reading for October. Hopefully it's got a little spooky flavor. If it's not occult detective fiction, maybe it's just straight up horror or ghost or eerie tales of some kind. I will see you in a future video, and thank you for watching as always. Take care, and we'll see you again.